Eastern philosophy, the journey back to oneself. Eastern philosophy, the journey back to oneself. In a world that grows increasingly noisy and hurried, modern people seem to drift further and further away from themselves. The blaring horns, tight schedules, constant competition, and overwhelming flow of information have made our minds strangely restless. Amid that whirlwind, there exists a philosophy that has endured for thousands of years, silent, steady, and profound, like a gentle invitation. Pause, turn inward, and find yourself again. That is Eastern philosophy, not a path to conquer the external world, but a way to dwell peacefully in the inner world. The distinct character of Eastern philosophy. Unlike Western philosophy, which often leans toward analysis, concepts, systems, and universal truths, Eastern philosophy does not construct grand edifices of logic. It doesn't aim to define or measure life, but instead invites one to live directly with experience, with the present, with breath, and with stillness. Thus, Eastern philosophy doesn't begin with the question, what is truth? But often begins with silence. And in that silence, there is not an absence of meaning, but a space where truth can emerge, subtly and gently. From the Taoist teachings of Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi, the Zen Buddhism of East Asia, to the Yoga and Vedanta philosophies of India, all share a common essence. They don't seek truth as something outside, but as a process of turning inward and recognizing what already is. Philosophy is to be lived, not debated. In the Bhagavad Gita, an ancient Indian scripture, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, "Do your duty without attachment to the results and remain even-minded in all circumstances. That equanimity is yoga." There is no long-winded reasoning, no forceful ideologies, just a teaching as light as the wind, yet as deep as the ocean. Because ultimately, the aim is not to understand, but to live. For the East, philosophy is not to be proven, but practiced. Not for arguing who is right or wrong, but for seeing suffering, impermanence, the illusion of self, and from that insight, to live more gently and mindfully. The teachings of the Buddha were never meant to explain the universe, but to help beings free themselves from suffering. Lao Tzu did not encourage control over the world, but letting go of control to return to nature. When words are no longer enough, the lesson from a flower and a smile. One of the most beautiful and simple images in Eastern philosophy is the story of the Buddha holding up a flower and smiling, without saying a word. The entire assembly was puzzled, except for one disciple, Ma Kashipa, who responded with a smile. And thus, Zen Buddhism was born. This was not a transmission of knowledge, but a transmission of mind, beyond language, beyond logic. When words are left behind, another kind of awareness appears, intuition, or a seeing that does not depend on thought. In today's world, where everything is explained, analyzed, and proven, the act of holding up a flower and smiling becomes an awakening touch, a reminder that some truths cannot be grasped by the intellect. That truth is not always at the end of a long chain of reasoning, but might arise in a moment of silence, in a gaze, or in a flower blooming in the morning mist. Alexander and the Eastern Awakening. History records a curious image. Alexander the Great, a student of Aristotle, conqueror of the known world, returned quietly after arriving in the East. It is said that when he reached Kashmir, he was no longer a warrior hungry for expansion, but a man touched by something unnamed. Perhaps, after conquering the external world, he realized that the inner world was the true undiscovered land. This is the heart of Eastern